Hello and welcome to a pre-launch teaser tutorial for special features.net. My name is Marco Lawrence and I'll be looking at fluid simulation within Blender today.
And this, ladies and gentlemen, is what we'll be creating. I mean, look at that. It's like milk sloshing about in an invisible cube with some red and blue and possibly some green dots. That is just great. Okay, so really this tutorial isn't about creating absolutely fantastic looking special effects. It's just understanding the principle behind Blender's fluid simulation. So let's get started. We'll start with that cube that we find when we start our Blender. We'll press S and just drag your mouse and make that cube pretty much the same size as our grid here in Blender. That looks great. Let's double click on that name and we'll call it domain. You'll understand soon why. Let's go here and choose wireframe mode. So we see inside this cube, this is where the fluid simulation will happen. Let's create some more cubes. So Shift A, mesh, cube. Let's drag that up a little bit. There we go, looks great. We'll double click on that, double left click and call it inflow. Let's do a Shift A again, mesh, cube, drag that up, and let's drag that to the side this time. We'll call that drops and particles. And then Shift A, mesh, cube, drag that up, and then a little bit to this side, and they look really nice. Double click on that cube. Let's call it floats, particles, and one more cube. Shift A, mesh, cube, drag that up, and then let's take it there behind everything. Double click on that, and let's do tracers and particles. There we go. You can really name these anything you want, but I like to name them kind of like that so I know what's going on. So here we have our tools for creating this fluid simulation. So let's start assigning these different meshes into different things within our fluid physics simulation. So let's choose first the domain cube and go into your physics tab here. Choose fluid. And then you can choose what kind of type, what kind of part it's going to play in our simulation. Click on that and choose domain. And as I said, that means that's the cube or the space where the simulation takes place, the kind of limits or borders for it. So you see that sort of change has happened already, but we'll breeze on. So let's do inflow here. Same thing, physics tab, choose fluid, and then choose inflow. So now this is where the fluid is going to flow out from. What we can choose here, how fast the fluid flows. And I want it to come from the y-axis side. So I'll just click on that and type 3. That's kind of sorted already. So what we can do is go to the domain. Let's actually make this animation a little bit shorter so we don't have to wait forever for it to load. So let's make it 100 frames. And let's preview what would happen if we would start the simulation right now. So here we can choose the resolution of the thing. At the moment, we're just interested at things work, so let's take it quite low. Let's think of 40 perhaps. Let's take the preview there as well, 40. And let's just see what happens. Now if I press the bake button, it's going to start simulating the thing. And here we have the progress of it. So I'm just going to pause this tutorial while it's thinking, so I'll be back in a sec. Okay people, just a little bit left. I am really excited to see what's going on. And there we go. Cool. Now we can start scrubbing through this simulation. As you see, there's this invisible cube that is around this fluid, and that's what it reacts to. So this inflow cube here, let's actually change this into solid so we see a little bit better. So this inflow cube here is getting all the fluid inside the domain cube, and then it just kind of sloshes around there. So that looks absolutely fantastic. Now it's quite blocky, so what you can do is choose that domain, go into this side on the object tools and choose smooth, and that looks a little bit better already. Great. So at this stage, to keep things a little bit clearer, I'd like to do some material stuff here. So let's choose our drops particles cube, go into a material tab, let's choose new, let's choose that diffuse color and make it red. Let's go into our floats cube, new, and diffuse and make it blue. And let's go into our traces, click on again in that material tab, new, diffuse color, and make it green. So this has absolutely nothing to do with fluid simulation, but just to keep things a little bit clear in my head so I know what cube is what. So let's go back into our domain and let's start looking at the settings. So go into your physics tab again. Now we have a couple of things that we can choose here. Resolution, at the moment we're kind of in a blobby stage, so yes, it flows, but it doesn't really look like real water. So we can pump this up quite high. The higher you go, obviously the longer it's going to take. I'm going to type in 180 here, and then on the preview I'll max it with 100. Here on the time, it asks us when do we want the simulations to start, and this means seconds. Speed here, how fast this simulation is happening. I'll take it a little bit slower, so I go 0.5, enter. And here on this is quite important. You can choose where you're going to save this simulation. So click on browse, and let's create a new folder here. Fluid sim tutorial. Let's accept that. So there we have it. The previous simulation that we did cached the files in that temporary folder. So now if we scrub through, we have nothing here. But that's okay. It was kind of blobby. Who cares? So at this stage, probably is a good time to save this project as well. So let's go save as, let's call it Fluid Sim 1. And save as Blender file. There we go. So let's go back into our wireframe mode so we see what's going on. So other settings that we can start looking at. Let's go into the fluid world. Here we can choose a preset for what the fluid is going to look like, honey, oil, or water. I'm going to go for water. These settings here will let you choose more accurately what's going on. I might talk about those in another tutorial, but not now. Real world size means kind of how long one of the edges in the domain is going to be. I'm just going to choose 1 meter here. And then fluid boundary, I'm not going to do anything there. And fluid particles. Now, this has to do with the other cubes that we created. So, tracer particles. This is where you can choose how many tracer particles you want in the scene. Let's just put max that for now, so you see what that looks like. 10,000, I believe that's the absolute maximum. Yes, it is. And then generate particles here. So as you see from that hint, if you have 0, it's not going to generate any particles. 1 is going to generate what it calls a normal amount of particles, and then more than 1, it's going to be lots and lots of particles. So I'm just going to go for 0.25 here. So that looks good. So now our domain settings are sort of done. Let's go into our particle cubes then. So I'm going to choose that drops particles thing. Slide that up a little bit, and now let's make that into our particle cube. So let's choose that fluid type, and let's go for particle, And here you can choose what kind of particles it's going to control. So let's go for drops. So here on the size, we can then change how much variation in the particle size we see. So I'll like to max that out so it looks a little bit natural. Alpha, it shows how much variation in the alpha value it's going to show, and I'm going to go to here as well. And then here we can choose where it's going to cache all those particle simulation files. So let's just click that and make sure that it's in our same place as we chose the fluid to be in, and that seems to be right. Let's go accept. Let's do the same thing on floats, particles, fluid, and particle. Let's make them float. Let's put size to alpha 2 and the right location, accept. And then last we have traces, particles, and choose that fluid, and particle, traces, and size 2, alpha 2, and the right cache location. That's great. So back in our domain, if we don't have anything here, if we have 0 here and 0 here, it's not going to generate any particles. But now we've chosen some settings, so now there's going to be actually particles in the scene. So now we're kind of ready to see what happens in our simulation. If you just press that bake, you see that progress bar here again. Things are happening already. Still, there's a long way to go. But you can start entertaining yourself by just dragging here. You can already start looking what's going on here. So you can see that's a fluid creeping along slowly. Let's go back into our solid mode, and voila. So now we see there's particles happening already, all sorts of action. It's looking a lot cooler than before. So I'm just going to pause this for now again while this is chugging along, and we'll come back when things are done. So here we are, the simulation is done. We have lots of liquid sloshing about, lots of particles flying all over the place. We can kind of scrub through, see how it looks like. Quite a lot of information in the scene, so this computer of mine can start chugging a little bit, but just have some patience. So what do we do now? Let's start by creating some icospheres that we can attach to those particles. So make sure that your cursor is in the center of the scene. If it's not, if it's somewhere here, just go into that little plus, drag it out, find that 3D cursor section, and just 0 everything. And you get the cursor back to the center of the scene. So now Shift A to create a icosphere. Now these are quite big. You can imagine if we attach them to all these particles, then it's just going to be a mess. So let's take the size down to 0.1, and then subdivisions, I don't want it to be as high detail, so I'll take that down to 1. So then it's not as detailed, easier to process. So I'll name that icosphere drops. I'll create another one, Shift A, icosphere. Now the settings have stayed the same, so that suits me absolutely fine. Let's call this floats. And one more, Shift A, icosphere. Double click on that, and then let's call it tracers. There we go. Let's do some housekeeping as well. So let's move these boxes to another layer. So we'll start with our drops particles box. If you just take your cursor to the main screen and then press M, and then you can choose another layer, and it disappears there. Takes all the particles with it, but don't worry about it. That's okay for now. Let's choose floats as well, that blue box, M, take it to another layer, and then tracers, M, move into another layer. Let's move that inflow box as well, M, into another layer. So that looks a little bit more tidy. Then let's start taking our icosphere and add some material to it. So our drops were red, our floats were blue, and then our tracers were green. So again, just that I know which one is which. Now we can start attaching them into those particles that we just created. So let's start with the drops. So choose the icosphere, go into the modifiers tab, and then choose particle instance. So we get this nice little dialog here. Click on that and choose your drops particles. And as you see now, the icospheres have been attached to the particles that were drops. Let's do the same with our floats. Go to the modifiers, particle instance, and then choose floats. And now they appear where the floats particles are. Last one, icosphere tracers, add a modifier, particle instance, and then tracers. So now we have all the particles visible in the scene. And if we scrub through, there's lots and lots of particles in the scene. So now if you're thinking that some of these are too big, so you can always grab, for example, our icosphere drops. Let's just turn all the other ones off. And let's just scrub into a more gentle part of the scene where we don't have that many particles to give our computers a little break. So you can go into, while the icosphere is selected, go into your edit mode. And then you can just press S and just start scaling your icosphere down a little bit. Now, as you see there now, smaller. Another thing that we can do is actually start using the settings that we did before. So as you remember, in our drops particles fluid settings, we started randomizing the size. So we can go actually to the icosphere itself, back to the modifiers, and click on that size box. And now it starts using the size information. And now our particles are randomly sized and a little bit smaller. And that looks good. Now let's turn those off. Let's go into our floats and let's do the same thing. Choose those floats, click on that size, and suddenly we're doing much better here. And then one more time with the tracers. Let's see where they are. Click on that size. Wonderful. So there we have it. Now we can put all of these on, and we'll have a wonderful, wonderful setup here. So now let's just start looking at rendering this beast. So let's first think of a sky here, so it's not this dull gray. So let's go to the world tab, click on the blend sky, horizon color. Let's make that quite bright. A tint of blue there perhaps, zenith. Let's make it like that perhaps. A little bit perkier blue. Something like that. That'll do for now. Then we can choose what kind of light setups we want. Let's add a little bit environmental lighting. Let's also grab that lamp that we had, and let's look at the settings. It has energy. Let's take that down to 0.5 since we have all that environmental lighting coming. And let's move that up perhaps a little bit and back, and that might do the trick. So now all we have left to do is really set up the camera. So press 0 on your numeric keypad and choose your camera. So now we're in our camera perspective view. So choose your camera, press G, and then press your middle mouse button, and then start moving your mouse down. So then you can start zooming out the whole camera. Left click to confirm. Let's scrub a little bit forward. Let's grab those floats and drops away, and then scrub to the later part in the simulation. There we go. So we see the whole simulation is full glory. We still have to zoom out a little bit. So camera selected, press G, middle mouse button, drag your mouse down. Looks good. And then press your G again after you confirmed with your left mouse button. And now just start moving your mouse around so you can start panning the camera into a place that you like. Now that looks absolutely amazing. A couple of things that we can check that our render settings are fine. Resolution, I've taken it down a little bit so we won't be rendering this forever, but you can change this to full HD if you want to. Frame rates, you can look at that, and everything looks pretty good. Let's look at this here. I'm gonna put this into another folder. So let's do a folder called Animation 3. Click somewhere here, create a new directory, fluid _ sounds perfect. So there we go. Let's remember to turn on all our particles. There we go. Drops, red, floats, we have blue, and then tracers are there, green. And then we can just press the animation button and see what's going on. So it looks promising. So this is going to take a while. I'm going to pause the recording for a little bit, and then I'll come back when everything's finished. Okay, so we're back. We're still rendering, but I thought we have enough material to wrap things up now. So frame 36, and it's looking pretty good. One thing I forgot to mention is it's a good idea to save your films as image files at this stage. I use PNG. You can use something else if you want to. Since if in the middle of your rendering process your computer crashes, or there's a massive earthquake or aliens attack, whatever, you still have all the files that you've rendered so far saved, instead of you trying to render the whole movie file and then the process was interrupted and you lost all that time. So image files. So what do we do with them? Then we can go to After Effects, for example, and then grab that folder where we had all those image files, and then left click and drag into the project tab. And then it imports all the files into After Effects as one movie file. So that's quite nice and handy. Then what you can do is left click and drag the file it created, and then just drag it on top of that little film icon, release your left mouse button, and it creates a nice comp for us. So there we have it. If you just kind of preview it, nice little simulation, looking pretty good. Now it's kind of up to you to take that further, start thinking of materials. I'll just see what is possible. I've done another render and I exported all the stuff to Modo, which is a really great program. And I attached some materials to the liquid, to the particles, and that looks pretty good. Now if you're wondering how I did that, that's gonna be another tutorial that will come soon. Let's just kind of show you the whole thing. So that is just beautiful. I mean, look at that. Wow. Okay, enough. So thanks for watching. I hope you learned something and got inspired. Things are pretty easy when you know how to do them. Oh my goodness. That phrase just earned me the Philosopher of the Year prize. Oh dear.